For the past few months, I've been doing everything I can to get stronger. My training has been exclusively focused on building up the big three and building as much strength as I can in the bench, deadlift, and the squat. I previously spent years where all I did was essentially bodybuilding training. I was always trying to get stronger. That was always the goal. Progressive overload is still key, but my emphasis was on size and not strength. How does my training look now in comparison to before? There are actually a ton of differences. So for one, my training now is much more specific. I'm doing way more volume in the squat, bench, and the deadlift than I was previously. Before I was doing lots of training, lots of volume, lots of bodybuilding exercises, but there was so much more variety in those exercises. When I was focused on bodybuilding, I would rarely perform the same movement twice in a week. Whereas now, I'm currently benching 2 to 3 times a week, squatting twice per week, and deadlifting twice per week. My training is much more specialized and really focused on building up my skill in those movements. That's a key component to strength training. It's much more skill-oriented. It matters how well you perform the movement. You can get better at the bench without getting bigger by simply performing the bench better. And so one of the ways you take advantage of that is through specialization. It's through performing that movement more frequently with a more direct emphasis on that performance outcome. And it's not just about frequency, because the goal for me with my strength training is to increase my 1 rep max strength in those lifts. So I could bench 3 times a week, but if I were doing it at all kinds of different rep ranges, it wouldn't necessarily carry over to my 1 rep max. A set of 30 on the bench, it might help build up your chest, it might look cool, but it's probably not going to increase your 1 rep max. Whereas now, most of my work has been pretty heavy, about 80 to 85% of my 1 rep max, with some variation in between. This kind of training, this kind of specialized, focused, frequent training will give me the most skill transfer to my 1 rep max and build the most strength. Additionally, when I do bodybuilding training, I take most of my sets to failure or close to it, maybe 1 rep shy. But when I'm focused on building strength, I'm not necessarily training to failure. In fact, training to failure can be counterproductive for strength training. I know that sounds weird because there's always been this emphasis on failure training, but the thing is, when you're trying to build strength, you're trying to teach the body to move quickly under heavy load. That's a counterintuitive concept because as the weight gets heavier, you are going to slow down. You cannot move a 1 rep max quickly. It is impossible by definition. However, the premise of strength training, the goal of strength training, is to move heavy weight as quickly as possible. If you kind of think about this logically, you have to move that 1 rep max fast enough so that you can complete the rep. If it gets too slow, you'll fail. That's what failure is. It's actually an inability to move the weight quickly enough. So when you're doing strength training, if you take every set to failure, that means those last reps are going to be very slow and grindy. And that actually isn't going to have the best transfer over to your 1 rep max. Because instead, you want to teach your body to move quickly with heavy weights, not slowly with heavy weights. So one of the best ways to do this is to do more sets of low reps. So for bodybuilding, you might do 3 sets of 10 on the bench to failure, right? That's very common. But if you're focused on strength, you should probably do 6 sets of 3, 7 sets of 3, something like that, so that your reps are lower and they're not quite as slow and grindy. Now, what this means in practice is that it's going to be way more tiring and fatiguing. Strength training takes so much more time than bodybuilding training, and it takes a lot more out of you because those reps are probably heavier. So for example, this past week, I did 7 sets of 3 on bench for 290 pounds for each rep being paused. If I were to do something similar in bodybuilding terms, I probably would have done 3 sets of 10 with maybe 265, right? So lighter weight, I could not have done 3 sets of 10 with 290, and that would have taken me 15-20 minutes, whereas that 7 sets of 3 with the 290 probably took 45 minutes, maybe even an hour, and I felt wrecked by the end. My arms were shaking. My chest was sore during the workout, and it's still sore even now. But training like that with lower reps and higher sets is going to help you build more strength, even if it's harder and takes more time. Thirdly, I want to focus in on this concept of time because it's really integral to understanding the difference between strength training and bodybuilding. For strength training, you need to be strong on a specific date. You need to perform that movement for a competition, for a test, so that you can PR. So what that means in practice is that throughout your training cycle, you're going to experience days, maybe even weeks, where you're not at your strongest. You're accumulating fatigue, and that fatigue is masking your performance. It's masking your ability to display peak athleticism. And this can be necessary for strength training because you need to peak. So we accumulate fatigue so that we can remove that fatigue and display our capabilities. With bodybuilding, it's not the same thing. I don't need to be super strong on Tuesday. I don't need to be super strong on Saturday. I basically just want to be getting slowly stronger over time. I'm riding that fatigue wave so that it never eclipses my performance, my adaptations. I'm still adapting about as quickly or more quickly than that fatigue is mounting. And so what that means in practice is that for bodybuilders, their strength on any given day isn't going to fluctuate as much as the strength athlete. Lastly, I do want to note, even though I've been focused on strength during this period of time, I have absolutely gotten bigger. My legs and my chest are definitely bigger. So I don't want to give you the impression that strength training is counterproductive or misaligned with the goal of putting on size. The real difference is it's just not very efficient. I've been working my ass off. This training is so much harder than my bodybuilding training, and I'm definitely getting less size gains per unit of time I'm training. So it's not a very efficient way to put on size, but it still works. And at the end of this, when I go back to bodybuilding training, I think it's really going to help. Not because I'll be stronger, that actually doesn't really matter, but because I'll have trained so hard that I think I can actually get more out of my bodybuilding training now because I understand it differently from another perspective. So I always encourage this when I talk to people. If you've been training in one paradigm for a really long time, you should try something else. Not necessarily because it's going to help you directly, but because that perspective shift can really make a difference in your mentality, and that will absolutely influence performance outcomes. Thanks for watching. If you found this video useful, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Appreciate you.